Secretary for the Office of Elementary and Secondary Education at PDE. And it's really my privilege to kick off the first in a series of webinars around accelerated learning and closing achievement gaps with an integrated system of support. I want to start by acknowledging that it's been an incredibly challenging year for all of us and our students and the families that we serve. And each of you has been asked to balance the competing demands of mitigating the impacts of a pandemic, while at the same time safeguarding and protecting the academic and social emotional well-being of students. And on behalf of PD, I truly commend each of you and all of those on your teams for your perseverance and your relentless commitment to the students that we serve. It's my hope as we get started here today that the resources that we're launching are going to better position you to continue to serve your students well throughout the remainder of this year and in the school year to come. And we look forward to partnering with you every step of the way. So with that, I'm going to screen share our presentation and we'll begin to walk through together. So before looking forward, I want to take a minute to do a look back and talk about some background and provide some background on the work that's been leading up to this series and our new resources. So at the beginning of COVID, we put out a roadmap for educational leaders with many resources to really help districts and position them as we headed into next year. And those resources contained systems conditions, academics, social emotional wellness, and scaffolded supports as the components of that roadmap. And for those of you that have been using the existing roadmap, these are going to be very familiar to you. And for those of you that haven't, really encourage you to go to our website and take a look at the existing resources that we have on our roadmap for educational leaders. And then that takes us into accelerated learning. And this is the next step and the next phase of the work that we already began on the roadmap series last year. So this isn't new. This is a sort of a continuation with the same guiding principles and the same theories of action. And our focus is going to be in this work on honoring lessons that we learned during the 2020-21 school year, preparing for the 21-22 school year, and in all of that, identifying and closing any achievement gaps that exist, particularly as a result of COVID. So the purpose of the work that we're doing is to provide a process and a system of support for LEAs as you're making key decisions for the start of the school year. So several things that we've done and our team has done in this design is to keep it simple and really focus on the tools that establish a process. It's flexible, so it allows LEAs to access individual components as needed. In other words, we've tried to differentiate our resources so that schools and districts don't need to go beginning to end sequentially, but it's built such that modules and components can be used as needed depending on where a school and district are heading. It's based on what we know works. And again, we had mentioned honoring some of the lessons that we've learned this year, highlights models and approaches, and provides the templates that guide the process for your local schools, including probing questions for reflection in decision making and the like. There is a collection of resources and research that will allow teams to go deeper when they want to have a deeper dive, and it ensures that all the processes in accelerated learning we've woven in equitable trauma-informed lens throughout. And so we're providing a series of professional learning activities for LEA teams that are going to be occurring beginning today and through April, May, and June to guide LEA teams. And there are going to be synchronous sessions like we're doing today, as well as asynchronous. And these are going to be posted on our accelerated learning webpage. I believe this will go up in just a few days. And finally, we're providing Act 45 credit in increments of either 30 or 60 credit hours for the participation and work that's done as part of accelerated learning. I have to take a minute here and really thank and commend our contributors to this process. This has been quite a bit of work in a short time frame. Our team at the Department of Education certainly has been leading these efforts, but we wouldn't be able to launch what we have today if not for our partners at the Pennsylvania Association of Intermediate Units, not only our executive directors, but so many members of our intermediate unit teams have been a part of creating and leading this work. And our patent network has also been a critical member of the leadership team that's been providing and launching this work as well. And what that's looked like to date is creating the content and structure for the components, the collection of relevant research, all of the templates to guide and record the LEA planning activities, and the professional learning workshops to share content and resources. So again, this has been a collaborative effort led by the department, as well as so many of our key partners and key colleagues, by the way, in addition to those that I just named. So a few parallel activities that we also want to elevate here as we're setting the stage. One of the things that has been happening in parallel to this work has been partnership with Remake Learning and KnowledgeWorks. For anyone here that's on the call in the Southwest, you're probably familiar with Remake Learning and KnowledgeWorks. And we've been partnering with them to lead stakeholder convenings across the Commonwealth to identify learning innovations, as well as expose learning inequities and influence positive change. So that process is tangential but connected to the work that's happening here in accelerated learning. And then also another parallel activity that's happening is we've been designing a system through utilizing and developed within PVAS to help schools and districts submit their local assessment data and use the same type of analysis tools that historically were only available for PSSAs, Keystones, and the like. And so we're opening a collection window for school districts to input their local assessment data and to do that through PIMS so that it feeds into the PVAS system. So want to make sure we signal that to you here as well, as that can be a critical tool in informing your planning at the local level. So I'm going to highlight 4 of the key areas as just a broad overview of the project, starting with the focus on high quality academics, the fostering supportive learning environments, establishing healthy system conditions, and designing a system of scaffolded supports as the 4 key components. So starting with the focus on high quality academics, one of the things that's going to be really critical as we move forward is defining the instructional changes needed for the new school year and creating and cultivating and building on the existing data culture to use student, family, and staff metrics. So we're talking about demographic as well as perceptual as well as student achievement data to inform the instructional and assessment planning. Some of the guiding questions around assessing, how to develop balanced approach to using formal and informal assessments along with other evidence and artifacts, how to analyze and interpret the data in a way that can be used to accelerate student learning, what instructional changes need to occur for 21-22 year and beyond. Ultimately, that's going to lead into that type of decision making. And then after or while and during and after implementation, how do we reflect, monitor, and share and create a data culture that can be effectively used to inform instruction and support teacher collaboration, and also engage parents and caregivers in the students' academic growth. In terms of fostering supportive learning environments, you know, placing equitable trauma-informed principles at the core of the planning, as we mentioned earlier, is really key and needs to be intertwined with all of our efforts. And so it includes not only student well-being, but staff well-being and connection. How do we create a culture of care in which staff growth is prioritized to create a culture where everyone feels safe and connected? For those of you that aren't aware, if you remember, I had mentioned the roadmap earlier. If you're not aware of this tool, please be aware that one of the resources we have is a staff and student wellness guide as part of our pre-existing roadmap work. And so you can see how this builds on that as part of the accelerated learning process. And then talking about student well-being and similarly, how do we create a culture of care in which student growth and well-being is prioritized in all of the decisions that are being made? And how can we identify the range of health and well-being needs so that we can provide students with and connect them with effective, culturally relevant supports? The third component is around establishing healthy systems conditions and engaging stakeholders to, again, elevate the voice of data in school communities. So that includes guiding questions in areas such as engagement. How will the needs of students and families, especially our most vulnerable populations, as well as the voices of teachers and school leaders, be incorporated into the planning? How are we dealing with the issue of connectivity and access to technology, whether in person or in remote learning? And really critical, we've had an entire team working on human capital issues. And so how can decisions about retention, assignment, and recruitment, along with professional learning, undergird and add utility to the planning and implementation for accelerated learning? And how are schedules impacted? How can data about health, safety, and student needs inform schedules? And again, we know that these guiding questions are really going to hopefully get teams thinking outside of the box about maybe even long-standing practices in schools that are going to definitely need to be revisited in order to best serve students and mitigate learning gaps. And how do we constantly monitor what's working well and needs to be adjusted? And then the last component, designing a system of scaffolded supports. Integrating layered customized support systems like training and tutoring with an approach informed by data, and integrating all of that into policies and procedures just has to be a part of all levels of the school infrastructure. And so, how can we look at a systems level at policies, procedures, and practices that need to be revised heading into the 21-22 school year and beyond, and really, again, focusing on scaffolded supports. As I mentioned before, this is a time to really revisit, in some cases, some longstanding policies and procedures in light of what the data is telling us that our students need. And what data do we possess or need to target in a particular area for improvement? And finally, what ongoing training do teachers and tutors need to improve the use of explicit instruction, and certainly the application of universal design for learning principles? And so, as we move forward, I'm going to come off of screen share here. There we are. So as we move forward, again, it's been my pleasure to tee things up at a high level. But our goal at the department is to provide all of you and your teams the resources, supports, and structures you need to navigate, again, not really just the end of this school year, but using this time to plan as we head into next year, the types of innovative systems and scaffolded instructional supports within an integrated system of support that are going to best serve your students. And please know that on behalf of our entire team at PDE and I think I can speak for our partners at the intermediate units and Patton and others. We're committed to walking through this with you for the long haul. You know, the impacts of the pandemic aren't felt just in the short term. We're going to be working through these impacts next year and beyond. And our goal and our commitment is to be with you and support you and provide technical assistance and resources every step of the way. So thank you for being here, and we look forward to partnering with you. And with that, I'm now going to turn it over to Dr. Rosemary Hughes, who's going to begin to launch us into some deeper content and discussion. So Rosemary, I turn it over to you.
Thanks, Matt. Good morning, almost afternoon, everybody. Thanks again for joining us. I and the team are extremely honored for the opportunity to launch this series by taking a little bit of a deeper look into the work that you'll be doing as you navigate the systems conditions portion of the toolkit. For the remainder of our time today, we will briefly explore the components of system conditions and then really zero in on a continuous improvement process and how the managing and improving section of the system conditions portion will create a space for you to access tools and resources to help you in that work. So before we get started, I'd love to just take a moment and kind of get a feel for who's joining us as part of this learning community this morning and this afternoon. And if you could just take a moment to type in the chat your name, the LEA and school that you represent, and the role that you play there. And while you do that, I want to take a moment to introduce you to the team that's going to be collaborating to facilitate this conversation, and in particular, the breakout discussions that we'll have later in our time today. Joining me, I have Michael Imbergia, who is the Director for School Improvement Performance Management at Berks County Intermediate Unit. Laura Mikołajczuk is the principal owner of Laura A. Mikołajczuk Design and Media LLC, as well as the project manager for the Pennsylvania Evidence Resource Center. Noreen O'Neill is the Director of Innovative Educational Services at Chester County Intermediate Unit, and also serves as the Project Director for the Pennsylvania Evidence Resource Center. And then we also have partners from our school improvement system who will serve as facilitators of breakout rooms. We have Andrew Coonrat from Bucks County Intermediate Unit, Carrie Fronifel from Allegheny Intermediate Unit, Laura McCusker, Tanya Moret, and Charles Travado from Lincoln Intermediate Unit, Barbara Mahalov from our Comprehensive Support and Improvement System, and Janelle Venkis from Appalachia Intermediate Unit. Systems conditions will focus the work of your school system on engaging stakeholders across your community to understand the needs of your system and respond with staffing, technology, scheduling, and continuous improvement processes that create the conditions to accelerate learning for all students. Within system conditions, you'll find 5 components. Stakeholder engagement will focus on ensuring the voices and needs of educators, students, and families are incorporated into planning for the 2021-22 school year and beyond. In the technology component, your system will focus on how you can leverage your enhanced technology infrastructure to accelerate learning for all students. Under staffing, you'll find resources and tools to help you ensure that all students have access to diverse, supported, and prepared educators. And in scheduling, you'll find tools and resources to inform the design of schedules that follow health and safety guidelines and prioritize staff and student well-being and acceleration of learning. And then finally, in the managing and improving component, you will find resources and tools to help your system approach the planning for these components, as well as any of the other components that you access in the toolkit from a continuous improvement mindset. Each of the components within system conditions, as well as in the other systems that Matt highlighted in the introduction, are organized in the same format. Each component starts with a brief statement about how the component contributes to ensuring all students have access to the resources, supports, and conditions that lead to acceleration of learning. This introductory statement is then followed by a list of key actions that will help your system answer critical questions required to develop a sound plan for the component that you're accessing. The key actions are accompanied by tools and resources that you can apply as you engage in those actions. And then each component ends with an overview and links to professional learning opportunities that are focused on that particular component and system within the toolkit. Keep an eye out for these icons, both within this webinar as well as future webinars, so that you can kind of spot where we're highlighting a worth it statement, a key action, a tool, or upcoming professional learning and networking opportunities. Today, we're going to zero in on the process for organizing for continuous improvement and how you can implement a continuous improvement mindset and process as you work with your school teams or system teams to develop a plan for acceleration of learning. The cycle that we're going to work through is a proven model for leading change efforts across multiple disciplines, contexts, and foci, and will likely be very familiar to those of you who have already engaged in the comprehensive planning process or the school planning process within the Future Ready Comprehensive Planning Portal. Continuous improvement isn't a new concept. It's been around for a long time. It was very prominent in industry and healthcare before becoming prominent in educational settings. And it's a cyclical process that's intended to help groups of people in a system set goals, identify ways to improve, and evaluate change. There are several frameworks for continuous improvement that you're likely familiar with. There's the Plan, Do, Study, Act model. There's the Six Sigma model. You'll see those models represented in the model that is on the left-hand side of the slide that you see here. Pennsylvania specifically selected this version of a continuous improvement process because of how the set the direction phase grounds the process in a purpose that's locally contextualized, and also reinforces the importance of ensuring that you have a firm foundation of shared ownership and responsibility through meaningful and inclusive stakeholder engagement. Setting the direction will become the foundation upon which the rest of the improvement process is built and becomes sort of a North Star to guide decision-making as the system works through the improvement process. So before we dive in, we wanted to give you a moment to kind of think about a frame of reference that you can apply as we facilitate the conversation moving forward. So take a moment and think about a challenge or a problem of practice that your system is currently trying to resolve or anticipates prioritizing as you look ahead to the summer and next school year. And we're going to ask that you write or type it and keep it close for quick reference, because you'll see this link icon embedded throughout the following slides. And it's your trigger to kind of think back to and ground your application of the concepts that we'll be discussing back to your problem of practice or challenge. Some examples that you could think of could be a priority statement that you've documented in your comp plan or your current school plan. Some other examples of problems of practice or problem statements that we've heard schools tackling could be focused on dropout rates among your high school population, or increasing chronic absenteeism rates that were already high prior to COVID and have gotten even more problematic in post-COVID, or a problem statement focused on the extent to which the learning environment is safe, supportive, and welcoming for all students and staff within your system. So I'm going to give you 1 minute to write or type, and you can keep it. You don't have to put it in the chat. This is just for your personal reference as we move on. So as you think about the focus of an improvement process, and you think about the problem statement or the challenge statement that you just documented, it's really important to engage a diverse complement of stakeholders in a meaningful and inclusive way. It's not only required under the Every Student Succeeds Act, but it's also a strong practice to effectively improve programs and services for students, because inclusive and transparent decision making leads to better decisions, encourages stakeholders to contribute and become part of the solution, builds local capacity to implement more innovative and ambitious strategies for meeting the needs of all students than the school might otherwise be positioned if they didn't have access to additional partners and shared owners. And finally, it ensures accountability for informed investment of resources, whether those are fiscal, material, or human resources. There is a tool that's embedded within the system conditions component that will help you orient yourself to thinking about not just who to engage, but how to meaningfully engage the various stakeholders that come to mind as you think about the challenge you're trying to tackle. In order to engage in a truly inclusive and meaningful way, it's important that systems commit to the guiding principles that you see here. When educators, students, and families and communities are deeply involved in creating solutions that address their own unique needs, those solutions are more likely to be effective and equitable. To ensure equitable engagement, school systems will need to monitor and refresh committee membership regularly throughout the cycle, and ensure that when you see that there are barriers in place that are preventing certain members of the community from participating, that you work to address those barriers and prevent them in the future. Systems can partner and share information with trusted community advocates in order to build a strong system for students' needs, both inside and outside of the classroom. And then two-way communication is really important to ensure that all voices are heard. And not only are they heard, but that then there's communication around how their feedback has been incorporated into decision-making. So let's pause and link back to the challenge statement or the problem of practice that you documented. And let's think about, as you look at the list that I'm about to put up here, who does your system typically engage? And when you think about the challenge statement or problem of practice, how could expanding this list lead to better understanding of the challenge or lead to improved capacity to address the challenge? So when we look at the traditional composition of committees across school systems in Pennsylvania, we typically see representation from the groups that you see here on the left side of this column. However, one thing that I want you to consider is just because these student groups are represented, it doesn't always mean that that representation is truly diverse, inclusive, and meaningful. So it's important to make extra efforts to engage with underrepresented and historically marginalized stakeholders, as well as ensuring the voices of students whose needs are not currently being met are incorporated into the improvement process. It is also important to stretch your thinking to include members of your education community that will bring a fresh perspective. Now take a moment to scan the list on the right. It's far less often that we see groups external to the school or district included as shared decision makers in an improvement process. If systems were not already aware of the power in growing the definition of one's education community to also include external partners, the lived experiences over the last year have certainly taught us this important lesson. Think about how you can continue to expand your thinking about how you define the membership of your education community. By including partners from the column on the right, you can instrumentally enhance your system's understanding of needs, access to critical resources to meet those needs, and staff or people to help you tackle the challenges ahead. We'll give you an opportunity to dig more into stakeholder engagement if this is a place where you see an opportunity to really enhance your efforts when you select your breakout rooms for the final portion of our webinar this afternoon. Once you've identified the diverse committee that will be the core leads of the improvement process, it's really important to ensure that the work of the committee ahead is grounded in clear purpose. So again, think back to the problem statement or challenge statement that you wrote down, and think about how you could establish consensus that this is the right problem, and that we're focusing our efforts in a way that's truly meaningful to better meet student needs. And that would be where you'd start that work with the committee, is really confirming that everybody is in agreement with and understands the problem we're trying to solve. From there, the improvement process then would turn to a needs assessment. And the needs assessment is then focused in a way that helps us understand the factors that are contributing to this agreed upon problem of practice. This model is probably really familiar to many of you. It's Bernhardt's model of multiple measures. What we really want to reinforce in terms of why this model is so important to think about as you engage in your needs assessment is typically what we see happen is needs assessments focus on the domain that you see at the bottom here, student learning. We're usually bringing quantitative information about student outcomes into a needs assessment process. And while it's really easy to want to immediately jump to solutions to address the concerns that we're seeing in those student learning data, it's really important for us to take stock of what the quote on the left is really reinforcing, which is there's something about the way that our system is designed or currently operating that's contributing to what we're seeing in those student learning data. And until we understand what those contributing factors are, so how demographics may have shifted, which should have resulted in some improvements or enhancements to our education program that maybe haven't been enacted, or understanding how from student and staff perceptions or family and community perceptions, we can better assess what about the student's learning experience might be contributing to what we're seeing in the data. And then finally, expanding the focus to also incorporate evidence, data sources, artifacts that focus on school processes. And when we triangulate data from across these 4 domains, it allows the system to then identify specific actions, processes, or programs that are currently meeting student needs, and then which ones are not. And that then allows you to intentionally focus the change efforts moving forward. So if we want different results, we need to understand what's working and what's not, for whom and why. And then that's how the committee's focus would then continue as you map out your plan to address those challenges. Again, this will be another topic area that has been prioritized for a breakout room. So if you'd like to dig more into this area, you'll have an opportunity to do that by selecting the multiple measures breakout room. Let's pause for a minute. And if you type the link that you see here into your browser, it'll take you to an image of Bernhardt's multiple measures model. And what we're interested in having you reflect on is, if you think about, again, the problem statement that you wrote in the beginning of this part of the webinar, how would, or what type of information, as you think about those 4 domains, does your system currently incorporate into the needs assessment? And so what you're going to do is, when you see the graphic, you're going to click on, sorry, I'm pulling it up so you can see it. You're going to click on one of these domains. You can click on multiple. So if your system includes demographics and student learning data, click on both of those. We're just going to give a minute for everybody to respond. So it looks like we have a really nice representation in each of the 4 domains. And then I see some have also started to put your marker where, 2 domains or several domains overlap. So keep this reflection in mind as you continue to digest the discussion that we're facilitating today, and as you think forward to how you will organize your system to better understand the factors that are contributing to the identified problem of practice and where you might be missing information. How could you gather that additional information that would allow you to really have a more holistic view of how the system is contributing to what you're seeing in the student learning data? So once we understand what factors are contributing to the problem statement, we're in a position to then better understand where we're going to focus our improvement efforts, which can then help us convert the problem statement to some statements that speak to what success would look like if we were to resolve the problem statement. And so those desired outcomes, you could think about them as what you typically would hear referred to as measurable goal statements. The process that the team would then be working through will then identify, in order to meet those desired outcomes, what change would we implement and how do we know that's the quote unquote right change? And as we're implementing, how will we know that our efforts are making a difference? So let's start with just thinking about the important takeaways or things to keep in mind as you're developing those desired outcome statements. It's typical that we see measurable goal statements focused on some aspect of improved student wellness and learning, which is really important. But what we've been trying to encourage systems in Pennsylvania as you're going through the comprehensive planning and school planning processes is also think about, in order to accomplish those end goals of improved areas of student well-being and learning, what would you have to see, or what would the impact be in terms of changes or shifts in adult beliefs, knowledge, practices, or behaviors? And making sure that you have some outcome statements or goal statements that focus on that. What are adults doing differently in order to yield the result we hope to see on behalf of students? And then also how the work would impact the quality of the materials that you're using in educational and support programs. Once you have those longer term or annual desired outcome statements, it's also important to know what are some major milestones or ways that we can start to assess if we're on track to attain those goals throughout the course of a given year or a given planning cycle. And so being able to establish some interim benchmarks that would allow us to assess if we're making the impact we had hoped, or if we need to make some mid-course adjustments so that we don't wait until the end of the process to find out that we're off track. Now we're going to shift our attention to the question of, we know what we want to achieve, how will we do it? And I'm going to turn the mic over to our team that leads the Evidence Resource Center to walk you through the way that we have incorporated an understanding of what's important to consider as we're making decisions about evidence-based strategies. And so, Laura, do you want to take it from here?
Great, thank you so much, Rosemary. My name is Laura Mikołajczak, and I am the project manager for the Evidence Resource Center, which is a resource that's available to you, online web-based clearinghouse that's available to you. And I want to thank you for the opportunity to describe how this resource can contribute to the strategies that you're going to be attempting and implementing in your schools to make a difference in this important work. Of course, as you're looking at strategies, and we'll talk a little bit more about those decision-making components, context and capacity play an essential role in what's going to work within your system. So it's really a combination of rigorous research or evidence, the context and the capacity that your school system has to implement that, to assess that evidence and implement a strategy well, and also then lead to an increased likelihood of making the impact on the specific outcomes and goals that you're trying to impact. So I want to take a moment now to just kind of introduce you to one of the resources that you can incorporate into your decision-making process and also your implementation process, and that is the Pennsylvania Evidence Resource Center. This website is located at evidenceforpa.org. And I don't know if you've been to this website yet, but it is available for everyone to browse with or without an account. So I encourage you to head there to take a look, but stay with me for just a moment as I describe how you can incorporate the elements of evidence on that site into your decision-making and thinking process. First of all, the Evidence Resource Center aims to equip school leaders with the key pieces they need to make an impact. And that involves not only the selection of a strategy that may impact your goals, but preparing your school system for the lift of implementing that strategy. Strategies on the ERC are organized by categories of outcomes. So mathematics or English language learners or some of our PA essential practices can be found on the homepage of the ERC, so you can zero in on the exact goals you're trying to achieve. Each strategy on the ERC includes a summary of the research studies, which will be our rigorous research component of that equation, that demonstrate the strategy's effectiveness. So you'll find that on each strategy page, scroll down to see individual study cards. Each of those entries are complete with contextual information, which again is the second part of that equation, and a summary of what happened in the study. And this is essential to determine under what conditions and with what students or staff the results were actually achieved in this rigorous evidence that we're going to be leaning on. Now, key to your success with any strategy implementation is knowing what it's going to take. And that can include the costs, the staffing needs, the technology or materials you might need to have on hand, and the professional development that will prepare the folks in your system to use the strategy well and implement with fidelity. The ERC aims to include these details whenever they're available in a study. And considering these pieces, you can begin to envision what you may already have in place or what you may need in order to see the results that you're looking for. Now, earlier in this presentation, a few moments ago, Rosemary guided you to start thinking about the outcomes that will demonstrate that the interventions you start to implement are actually having an impact. So what does success look like? What does making progress look like in your key areas? The ERC breaks down results like that in outcomes for you and also assigns them an ESSA tier. So you can draw connections directly between your goals and what the evidence says actually happened when this particular strategy was tested. In the strategy that you're seeing on your screen now, this particular strategy impacted at a tier 1 level, which is the strongest level of evidence, college credits earned in high school, associate's degree attainment, and enrollment in a 2-year institution. So for those who might be working on that goal, this strategy would have potential. Now, the ERC is hopefully much more than a clearinghouse. We know there are lots of options for you to find studies and evidence-based strategies on the internet. However, what we encourage you to do is kind of go one level deeper on the ERC. First of all, be sure to check out the ERC's COVID collection. We have this right on the homepage at the top right. This includes a set of strategies that may have particular relevance or usefulness in the wake of the pandemic. So strategies with relevant outcomes related to social emotional learning, related to learning gaps, and also delivery models that may be particularly effective given the conditions that you're facing and your hybrid or in-person or remote learning situations. Second, I encourage you to create an account when you're on the ERC. You don't need one to access the strategies, but it sure is helpful to be able to pin the strategies that have potential as you do your search work. This will save you a lot of time, allowing you to sort of capture your work in an individual session of looking for strategies. And the last thing, which is the part that I'm most excited about, is that once you have an implementation story to share, whether that's success, whether it's moderate success, but really needing some adaptations, or whether it's this really didn't work for us, I want to encourage you to come back to the ERC and use our experiences tool to share that information. You'll find that tool by clicking on the Used It button on any one of our strategies. This tool is going to capture the things that you've learned during an implementation of a strategy, which is really precious information, not only for your records, but for the folks who may ask you, what are you doing? What's working in your school system? We'd like to capture that information and make it available to other education leaders. It will aggregate your positive results, your success stories, your cautionary tales, and your helpful tips for how you made the implementation work really well in your system. Ultimately, this is the power of the ERC, to learn not just from that rigorous research piece, that peer-reviewed evidence piece, but also to learn from each other by the things that you had to do during your implementation to make it work. Again, I encourage you to head to evidenceforpa.org to get started, from a browsing level to look for strategies, from an implementation level to look at what's the lift of an individual strategy, and then come on back to leave some feedback and help others do the same. Thanks so much. Rosemary, back to you.
Thanks, Laura. So we're going to round out our conversation about the continuous improvement process and get us off into breakout rooms with thinking about a framework that is likely familiar. And if this particular framework, the change puzzle, is not entirely familiar, you could also think about the Lippitt-Noster managing complex change model. Both models reinforce that there are critical elements that, when combined in a very intentional and strategic way, contribute to the system's efforts to enact change and accomplish goals. And that if any one of these elements is missing, it's likely to yield less positive results, and it impacts the process in very different ways. So for example, you can see that if you go down to the third row, if we have 5 of the 6 elements, but we're missing a really clear purpose and vision statement, it could result in a process that yields confusion and is wrought with confusion. If you think about the discussion that we have facilitated so far, we have covered key elements or key ways of engaging in a continuous improvement process that will ensure and establish a foundation for trust. We focused on vision, and we focused on results. What we haven't covered yet, and what's covered in the managing and improvement component within system conditions in the accelerated learning toolkit, are modified versions of the planning template that we use in the comprehensive planning and school planning processes. We've just adapted them slightly so that they can resonate outside of those more formal processes and help you document your system's thinking and the plan that you've mapped to accelerate learning for next school year and beyond. And when you get a chance to look into those templates, what you'll find is it fills in the gaps that currently exist in terms of the remaining 3 components. You'll focus on the strategy and what it would take to implement that strategy well. And that in order to do that, then what skills do adults, students, family members, community members need to contribute to the effective implementation? What resources need to be in place? And then what is the timeline for the action plan itself? So with that, we'd like to move into an opportunity for us to engage a little deeper into whichever one of these 4 areas is an opportunity for enhancement or a topic area that is most interest to you. So as you think about your challenge or problem of practice statement and the discussion that we've had so far, we're going to ask that you pick a breakout room. One will focus on inclusive stakeholder engagement. Another will focus on implementing Bernhardt's model of multiple measures in your needs assessment. Another option is grounding strategy selection in evidence and context. And then the final option is designing effective action plans. So in a moment, we're going to make the breakout rooms available. And what you see on this screen are 3 different options for ways that you can find the breakout room that you're most interested in joining and then get into that room. You'll see on the right-hand side the labels of the room, and then you will either be able to join the room by following the prompt on the box that will emerge, Or if you don't see the prompt and you can't find the breakout room box, you're welcome to change the way that your name is displayed. So option 2, rename yourself, and after your name, input either engagement, needs assessment, strategy selection, or action plan, or just use the chat. We will manage getting everybody to where you want to go. We're going to spend about 25 minutes in the breakout rooms. We will come back at 12:50 so that I can really quickly highlight some opportunities for professional learning and collaboration, focus on system conditions that are ahead of us, and then we'll close out for the day. So we can go ahead and open the breakout rooms. Welcome back. I hope that you found the opportunity to dig a little bit deeper into a particular topic area and hear some of the lessons learned or ideas from others was valuable. This is just the beginning of months worth of opportunities to continue to connect and engage in discussions like the one that we're having today. And what I want to do is, as we close, highlight those opportunities for learning and networking that are specific to the systems conditions portion of the toolkit. So within the realm of stakeholder engagement, there are 4 opportunities, as you see listed here. One of which is happening tomorrow, which is through the patent system. It's part 1 of a 2-part series. And then there are some other opportunities that are upcoming that will be stakeholder mapping will be a live session on April 27th. Developing district-wide procedures for online and hybrid learning programs will be a webinar that'll be posted, but it'll be asynchronous on April 27th. And then part 2 of the what administrators need to know about family engagement is being offered on May 3rd. Within the staffing component of systems conditions, again, we have 4 opportunities, one of which is coming very soon. It'll be posted on the landing page that'll be created for the Accelerated Learning Toolkit, and it's focusing on assessing educators' capacity and needs regarding effectively teaching and accelerating learning. There will be one focused on staff wellness and working climate and conditions on May 4th. Recruitment, hiring, and training for extended learning opportunities will be posted on April 27th. And then a session focused on mentoring and induction will be, mentoring and induction will be offered on June 10th. Under scheduling, next week we'll have a conversation that will rely on a panel discussion where we will highlight lessons learned from scheduling and transitions across learning environments over the past year. And so that panel will include system leaders from within Pennsylvania's education system. And then finally, for managing and improving, on Thursday, we will have a conversation around framing community conversations. And then on June 8th, there will be a session focused on the latter part of the cycle of improvement, which will focus on implementation and monitoring routines. So in order to get credit for your attendance today, this slide gives you access to the link and the barcode that you need, as well as the exit code for this session. So I'm going to hold off on moving this slide so you can capture the information that you need in order to submit your attendance for the session. So please feel free to take a screenshot or go ahead and follow the link. Does anybody need more time on this slide? Just go ahead and let me know in the chat that you need another minute. Thank you. Sarah put the attendance link in the chat box for you. So thank you again on behalf of our team. We really appreciate the opportunity that we had to connect with you this afternoon, and are looking forward to continue to connecting with you throughout the course of the webinar series and the work ahead. We hope that you took at least one thing from the conversation today. There's plenty more to benefit from once the toolkit is disseminated, and you can really get in and start digging into the key actions and the tools that are embedded within there. So I hope you have a great rest of your day.